Chargers. Touchdown, UCLA.
With USC great and NFL stud, Frosty Rucker.
The Trojans back in front.
And LAFB founder Ryan Dyrud on the Believe Podcast Network and LAFBnetwork.com. This is your destination for Los Angeles football.
What is up, Los Angeles football fans? Welcome into the LA Football Show right here on the LA Football Network. We are everywhere you get your podcast, on YouTube at LAFB Network, and of course on LAFBnetwork.com, where you can get all of our shows, podcasts, articles, merchandise. Everything you need is housed right there. Special show for you today, just in time for the live radio show on the Mightier 1090 ESPN. Big announcement here on the LA Football Show. You've seen him before. You know the face. The Madman does our, Draft is in Session show, also does a lot with the Bruin Bible, does writing for us, co-owner of the LA Football Network. But I am excited and thrilled to announce that he is joining me as my full-time co-host going forward on the LA Football Show. So Jamal, the Madman, what's up, brother? How we doing?
Ride or die. So great to be here, man. It's so honored to be doing this with you moving forward. So excited. And just what a great LAFB family we're continuing to create and grow. And this is going to be so much fun. And what a year ahead in LA football, and can't wait to be on the ride with you.
Yeah, I'm excited to not have to do the intro every time. Now I can have someone else do it every now and then. I'm pumped. But quickly, speaking of create and grow, we got to give a shout out to Danny Dubb, host of Chargers Unleashed. Welcomed his daughter into the world just last weekend. Avery Grace, I believe, is the name. So shout out him. It's crazy, Jamal. Looking over the network, I'm pretty sure Chauncey, who is one of our Rams writers and does LA Confidential, has a daughter. And Brittany Betts has two beautiful daughters. And outside of that, it was just me with a kid. So it's nice that someone else will understand I don't want to say tortures, but the difficulties of being a full-time content creator with a young child at home.
That's awesome. And, Danny Dubb is, one of the members of the Fab Five of the LAFB. And so just so thrilled for him and his family. And Ryan, what's also interesting is that it's all daughters. Let's see when the first LAFB boy appears as well. That'll be an interesting one.
Well, it's funny you say that. Chauncey told us in Slack yesterday, out of nowhere, that they're expecting a son this fall. Yeah, it was funny. He said, not to get into too much, but I think it was kind of funny. He wrote hey, by the way, I'm writing a Rams schedule piece, which by the way is up on LAFBnetwork.com if you want to check it out. He's like, I'm writing a schedule piece and I want to go to the Cowboys game, but it all depends on when my son gets here. And the way I read it was he wanted to write until the Cowboys game, but his son, they were in the delivery room, as he was writing this. I'm like, first of all, you don't need to be writing a schedule piece if your wife's giving birth, but he meant he wants to actually go to the Cowboys game in the fall, but his wife is due to have their son. But I misread that, just the way he typed it. But anyway, shout out to him also, the first LAFB son coming soon. So, yeah, Jamal, happy you're here with me. This is gonna be fun. This is gonna be a blast.
Absolutely, man. This is gonna be a ton of fun. And I think when we have our kind of team get together, we might need to do sort of the Lion King pictures with all the parents, and where we got the Simba at the top there. I think that may be in order.
I agree. Yeah, Mia would love it too. Maybe not over a cliff like Pride Rock, but we can do it in a safe environment. Yeah, it's a great idea. So today's show, unless you live under a rock, everyone knows the NFL schedule was officially released yesterday. So we're going to dive into the Rams and Chargers schedule. We're not going to go game by game predictions yet. We'll do that later in the offseason. But we're definitely going to talk about our games we're most looking forward to, some primetime games, maybe get into an away game we want to do a tailgate at. I don't know. We're going to get into a bunch of stuff. We're also going to do a little bit of college talk with some portal news still. Addison, former Biletnikoff winner, has his hat in the ring. Potentially SC is in the talks. We'll talk about that. I have some other stuff I want to start with. We'll just get to in just a second. Real quick, though, Jamal, as always, got to thank our friends at BetOnline. Who sponsor the show. Make sure to head to betonline.ag today on your mobile or desktop device. Use the promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, to get a 50% welcome bonus. That's free money. $100 you put in, you get $50 for free to play with. Can't go wrong. Plenty of stuff to bet on right now. I actually I wouldn't say I won a lot, but I won some money on hockey last night. I think hockey's easier to bet than basketball. What do you say?
Oh,
I know
for
you're not really
sure.
a betting man, but
Basketball betting, that's a tough game.
yeah.
Hockey is there's still, I think, a lot of controllability to the game in a certain way. And you with your Colorado and hockey roots, I'm sure, you've got the inside track.
Well, it's shout out Colorado, got St. Louis Blues in the next round, but hockey is very difficult in like score projection, over under, like who's going to win in the playoffs because it's so volatile. Like there's really, I mean, other than the Avalanche this year, I mean, there's 5 game 7s going on in the first round of the playoffs. Like basketball, you kind of know who's going to win the series, who's going to win out. Where hockey's easier is you kind of can predict what the star players will do. So if it's like, and I'm going to bore people, but since we're talking about Bet Online, if you're talking Nathan McKinnon or Connor McDavid or Austin Matthews, star players, and they have a line of over under 1.5 points, you can always predict they're probably going to have over that because they're the star players in the playoffs really are the star players. Similarly at basketball, but you have a game where Steph goes for 50 and then Steph scores 12 the next game is more common than Connor McDavid scoring 2 goals and then one game having no points. So anyway, who's taking the NBA Finals?
Yeah, no, and the challenge, and we promise we'll get to football here in 30 seconds, but I think the challenge with betting in basketball is the fouling at the end, right? And so the swing in terms of point differential can go so wildly in one way or the other, and a nail biter can end up becoming a 12-point victory that's not reflective of the score, and a blowout, once you sort of clear the bench, can end up becoming a 7-point, 6-point win, but it was a 20-point game the whole way through. And the devil is really in the details in basketball, especially when you're going line.
Yeah, 100%. And so before I move on, I know you're more of a basketball guy than hockey. So who you taking? We're what, almost done with round 2 now. Who's winning it all?
I think the Bucks are going to repeat.
Bucks, yeah.
Yeah, I think the Bucks are going to repeat. I just don't think there's. I actually had my 3 best teams in the East were Milwaukee, Philly, and Brooklyn, and Philly and Brooklyn just absolutely imploded in historic fashion in many ways. And I still think that Giannis is a superstar. And I think out West, I think Golden State and Phoenix will sort of eke their way through and make it to the Western Conference Finals. But I don't think either team, truth be told, is as good as Milwaukee is with Giannis, assuming Chris Middleton comes back. I think they need him for the title run. But if Middleton does, in fact, come back, and indications are that he will, I think I'm going to go with Milwaukee.
Yeah, I think they're the favorite. Miami looks pretty good, but I just don't know if they have enough firepower in that. It's crazy to think, Jamal, that Jimmy Butler once was on Philadelphia. Like, think if he was still with Philly and Embiid. Instead, they move heaven and earth for, trading Simmons, getting Harden, and
my back, Ryan.
Oh, man. I'm a hockey guy, so I'm not going to get into these basketball injuries because in hockey, there are no injuries. You find out after the playoffs, guys are playing with broken femurs, and they're like, oh, yeah, I had a hole in my spleen and it still played. But anyway,
the line is with Butler and Embiid. You could tell last night how much they actually wanted to stay playing together. Their individual press conferences last night was so remorseful in a way. Embiid was basically saying, God, I wish I still had a few more runs with Jimmy Butler. And Butler was basically saying, hey, I have so much love for that team. I wish I was still there. I love being in Miami, obviously, and having a great time, and it's a perfect fit. But you could tell they both wanted it. And this is sort of an example sometimes when management outthinks and doesn't sort of take relationships into account and doesn't take sort of player thought process into account, and they think they know best. And that's really, it's sort of a tragedy in Philly because I think they had a title run in them in this window, and that window may be closed at this point.
Yeah, well, it could have been, and I'm not comparing them specifically to players, but I feel like we haven't seen a guard big man true duo of the Kobe Shaq since that could have potentially been Jimmy Butler and Joel Embiid. Because I feel like, and you could argue that, when Jamal Murray is healthy, there's the Jamal Murray and Jokic and Denver, which is a great guard big man duo, but there's not a lot of guard big man duos like there were back in the 90s and 2000s anymore, because now it's all about the shooting and stuff, and basketball far more than me, but that's just my observation. But anyway, betonline.ag, promo code BELIEVE, 50% welcome bonus. All right, Jamal, should we get to some football?
Well, I think we're the LA football podcast after all.
I guess, yeah. Before we get to LA football, though, got to talk a little news. Tom Brady signing this insane deal in broadcasting. What was it, with Fox?
With Fox.
With Fox. I think that the numbers came out. It was like 37.5 million or something per season. What's
Yeah,
your
10.
yeah, unbelievable. So I mean, what's just your thoughts on these athletes without ever doing it a day getting these crazy contracts?
I actually think, Ryan, what's fascinating is there's a weird supply demand situation with NFL analysis. Like, if you think about it, there's only 6 or 7 jobs, right? I mean, you've got CBS, you've got NBC, you've got Fox, and you've got NFL Network. And I think that sort of Tony Romo blew the cap off of the explosion of how much these guys are getting paid, and Romo was so good his first year in terms of analysis that people were tuning in for Romo, and I think that that's continued to be the case. But at the same time, I don't know how many folks can actually sort of do this job well, and so it's sort of a very bizarre thing. Like, I wonder what the Fox thought process is. Obviously, they lost Troy Aikman, they lost Joe Buck, they felt like they had to make a big splash. But I think folks may also be over-rotating a little bit on how much fans are going to tune in to a regional game, a general game, if they don't have, NFL Sunday Ticket or one of these customized sort of providers for just the analysis and not for the game itself. And so it's an interesting bet that Fox is making. Obviously, Brady is a huge name, greatest quarterback of all time. I don't know how well Brady is going to do in the booth, though. I'm a huge Brady guy, but Peyton Manning is the greatest NFL endorser and personality that I think we've ever seen. And I worry a little bit about Brady and Fox. The parallel to me is actually, I think, Shaq on TNT. I think there was this expectation that Shaq was just going to be this incredible personality in basketball because of how well he was with the media and in his press conferences and his one-liners. And when the reality didn't meet the expectation, Shaq is okay. He's good. He plays off of Barkley, but Barkley's the straw that stirs the drink. And I don't know if Brady kind of has that self-deprecating personality that you sort of need to be a great NFL analyst. And so I wonder, but more power to him for getting the bag, as they say. But holy cow. I mean, frankly, the job to have in the NFL, Ryan, is analyst. In terms of money, quality of life, the whole deal, the analysts are the ones that are winning. It's not the coaches. And in some cases, unless you're Patrick Mahomes, it's not really the players either. It's the analyst is the job at this point in the NFL, as crazy as it sounds.
Yeah, it's insane. And he'll make more over this if he goes through the full contract. He'll make more over that than he has in the last decade of his playing career as the best quarterback in football, which is insane. And I don't know how he'll pan out. Like I'm not going to judge it till we see it, but I just know from what I've seen in him talking. And here's what I think, Jamal. I don't know if you ever watched The Match, the golf thing that he's been on, Peyton Manning's been on with Tiger and Phil and some of those guys. Aaron Rodgers did last year. This year, they actually are just doing 4 quarterbacks, which should be a lot of fun out in Vegas next month. But when you watch that, and I think specifically I think the first one was Thanksgiving when it was him and Phil against Tiger and Peyton. And Peyton and Phil were hilarious the whole time. They were mic'd up, talking, like analyzing, like Phil was talking about his shots. Even Peyton's going back and forth, talking about what he's going to do here, breaking it down. It was just a lot of fun commentary. Tiger and Brady were still just kind of honed in. I mean, everyone knows this about Tiger anyway, but even Brady, like, wasn't really talking a lot. Even when he did talk, he was real kind of, I don't want to say nervous, but like tight-lipped and didn't say much. And it took until he was playing so bad and hit a hole-in-one to really kind of open up. And obviously he'll have practice doing this. But I think of that, I'm like, did they use that as his resume and said, yeah, he'll be good enough? And we'll give him almost $40 million a year. So we'll see. I mean, he is the GOAT. Obviously, he's all about preparation. I'm sure he'll practice a lot. But the last thing about this, Jamal, I want to ask you before we move on to the schedule is I find it funny, and I have no problem with it. I'm a full capitalism. Hey, what sells? Whoever can do it, do it. Whatever makes money, I get it. But it's funny to me that when you look at coaching, and I want to phrase this correctly, but when you look at head coaching specifically, and obviously there's race issues and stuff like that is a layer in and of itself. But when someone climbs the ranks very quickly in coaching, a la, Brandon Staley just a few years ago, Josh McCown had an interview with the Houston Texans after just being a quarterback. It's like the world freaks out about this fairness. Like, wow, this guy doesn't even done it. And now you're going to give him the keys to be a head coach. Everyone freaks out. In media, hundreds of thousands of people, me and yourself included, I'm not saying I'm upset with this, but I'm just painting a picture here, go through years and years of grinding. Of a lot of people go through school, working at middling jobs as producers, working in Albuquerque or Big Sky, Idaho, or somewhere where they're just trying to climb the pedestal. And the peak of the job, they never even get to sniff, because an athlete who's never done it gets paid millions and millions of dollars. What's your thoughts on that? I've always just been curious and no one cares. Everyone's like, oh yeah, this is great. This is great for broadcast. But you get all these actual people that are trying to strive for that just get cast aside. What's your thoughts on that?
Ryan, I think you've said it better than I've ever heard that before. And it's so true. And I think that where TV and being in front of the camera sort of gets away with it is that there are fundamental inequities in those jobs that we have sort of accepted as a society, where, and if we really want to sort of get to the heart of the matter, you have to look a certain way to be in front of the camera, unfortunately, and that shouldn't be the case. But somehow as a society, we've sort of accepted that. And then the second inequity is, obviously, you've got the Joe Bucks, the Bob Costases of the world, and so forth. But there's sort of this other inequity that you have to be an ex-player. An ex-player has to be in the booth to give this sort of legitimacy. And when you sort of dwindle that down in terms of people who want to do it, who are well-spoken, who are good-looking, who are ex-players with credibility, all of a sudden, those inequities make that slice of the pie in terms of eligible candidates so small that somebody like a Tom Brady can just swoop in and get $375 million. But it's so fascinating as a society that we just accept that. We accept that in front of the camera, you have to be good looking, you have to be an ex-player, et cetera, when those inequities are just as great as the other inequities that we face in society. And I think this is a conversation we must continue to have. I totally agree. And to your earlier point, Ryan, it's going to have to be a different Tom Brady. The Tom Brady of today, the Tom Brady as a player, is going to bomb as an analyst. And even by his own admission in Man in the Arena and some of these other things, where he's intentionally, even when he was on the shop with LeBron and all of that, he said, he was intentionally cagey with the media. He was intentionally coy with the media. He was intentionally shy with the media because he didn't want to give out any secret, anything about his preparation, because he was so maniacal about being prepared. And so now he's going to have to sort of change that, where he doesn't have skin in the game to then be able to really open up. And we'll see if someone can sort of fundamentally change their personality at 45, 46, 47, whenever it will be, when he ends up going into the booth. But it's a fascinating point about this sort of level of acceptance that we've had as a society when it comes to being in front of the camera versus just being in front of society.
Yeah, it's interesting. And hey, kudos to him. We'll see how he does. I'm curious because there's always been reports that Manning's been offered many times by these networks. So I'm curious what those offers were that he still was like, nah, I'm good. I enjoy having my freedom and doing this, because they all wanted him. It's not that they didn't want him and they just wanted Brady more. It's just like, all right, well, Manning keeps turning us down. Let's go get Brady now. I'm curious if they offered more than that to Manning, or if this is more. I wonder if Manning comes out and said, well, you never offered me $37 million.
Peyton's the guy, I'll tell you, Ryan, that NFL fans will tune in to that station just to hear him. I mean, look, when we were driving back from Vegas, right, from the NFL draft, what did we play as we started having these conversations? We reheard and rewatched Peyton's SP opening monologue, and we're cracking up the same way we did when it was live 4 or 5 years ago to when it was today. People would absolutely tune in. It could be the worst game. It could be Jaguars-Texans, and people will tune in to hear Peyton Manning. I don't think you can say that about anybody else in the industry, including Tom Brady. And so it's a really fascinating, it shows, truth be told, I think it shows a desperation that Fox has right now.
Yeah, and look at the Manning cast that launched last year on Monday night on ESPN. It had almost more viewers than the regular broadcast. And in the beginning, they didn't even promote it much. So it was like one of those, you heard it through social media, on Twitter or word of mouth. And then you're like, oh, I got to tune into this. And then after like a while, I think they realized, oh, wow, this is like a really good product. We should start promoting on ESPN. And it started pulling people away from the main broadcast of Louis Riddick and those guys. And everyone's like, let's just watch the Manning brothers have Pat McAfee on and all these, Russell Wilson, and watch them break down film. It was great in their basements eating. Like that was like the true content. And Jamal, we're almost done with our first segment, so we'll just continue with this before we get to the schedule, because we'll do that in the second segment. But I think Manning, do you think, last thing about him, will he ever join a network, or is he content kind of doing this model of doing it himself, which is he was able to do last year?
I think he's going to be a bit of a trailblazer in this regard, because I think if you talk to folks in the industry and you talk about viewership with professional sports, whether it's NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, there is a problem right now, especially when you see societally how millennials and Gen Zers consume content. And when you sort of overlay that with sort of the existing structures that take place over, how broadcasting is done and how content is shared, there's something that's broken there. And there's a wide acknowledgement that the way it has worked in terms of telecasts over the past 50, 60 years is not going to work moving forward. And I think Brady getting so much money is an acknowledgement by the incumbents that is very well the case, because if we don't get a Tom Brady, we don't get the greatest quarterback of all time, what are we really going to do? And I think Peyton is the best of the best by far. And I think he's going to sort of experiment with some of these models where he has his own show on ESPN. Maybe he'll have his own show on Fox, where he becomes the brand and he becomes kind of platform agnostic and does things with all these different brands. And when you couple that with all of the endorsement dollars that he continues to get, I think he's actually going to make more than just being locked in to any one network. Because I think the Romos and the Bradys, I think there's some incentives and some clauses there for them to get out earlier. And I think what will reveal itself, even Romo, like you can tell that there was a little bit of a drop off after year one. And I think Romo's kind of plateaued a little bit, not in terms of how well his analysis is, but how much people are tuning in to watch as a result of his analysis. That's plateaued. I think Fox will get a 1 year, bump, because everyone kind of wants to see Brady. But then once they see it, I think there'll be a dive. So these are big numbers at the aggregate. But I don't know how much these guys are actually going to get all of that money and how much they'll stay as a result of the viewership. And I think Peyton's playing a longer game. I think Peyton's playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers. And I think he's going to be agnostic to all these platforms and do even more, because I think he recognizes that his talent and the receptivity of his talent is much greater than any of these other guys.
Yeah, per usual, playing chess while the rest are playing checkers. And Peyton, if you're listening, LAFB Network would love to have you. We can offer you probably about $5,000 a year, but we're a budding young startup with a lot of fun. So if Peyton wants to come here, all right, we're gonna take a quick break. Bottom of the hour, as promised, we will get into the schedule. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. All right, Jamal, I can already tell, having you as a co-host, these are going to be like 2-hour-long shows, which is great. Once we get talking, once we get into it, and that doesn't even include if we have guests on, so can't wait. But let's get into the schedule now. The meat of the show, released yesterday, finally. First of all, I have to ask you, every team, which I don't remember them doing this in years past, but every team right at 5:00 Pacific, they released their own like announcement, whether it was a video they created or just like a graphic or something. And, the Rams kind of played along with their draft video where they had the heist and the, all the Hollywood actors, and it was a very well done production. The Chargers released like an anime style depiction of each matchup each week. And it was just unbelievably done. Hilarious. Did you see it?
I did. It was incredible. I mean, in terms of creativity, the Chargers won the day. There's no question about it. That was unreal. I had friends messaging me of, can you believe how they sort of depicted Urban Meyer? Can you believe, some of the other things that they did? It was really, really incredible.
It was unbelievable. And there's so many, it was like an Easter egg hunt going through and finding all the little intricacies, which I need to watch it again, to be honest, because I was working somewhere else, not home. So it was kind of noisy where I was. So I didn't even hear everything. But yeah, the Urban Meyer in week 3, it's like a dude sitting at a bar with the Jacksonville Jaguars head, and I'm trying to think of some other ones, but it was very well done. And the Chargers, if those that don't know, the Chargers social team won a Webby, which is like the highest honor for, internet, not just social team, but internet content creation. And so they won that. So let's start with the Chargers, then we'll get to the Rams. Jamal, give me some games that 5 primetime games. Some of those are in division, some of those out of division. They have I wouldn't call it a crazy hard schedule like the Rams, which we're going to get to here soon. But I mean, it's still a fairly difficult schedule, just with their division, but then they have some out of division games that will be challenging as well. But what were some that stuck out to you? And we can kind of break them down as you go through.
Ryan, obviously they're in the greatest division in football, right? So all of their in-division games are going to be absolutely must-see, in particular with the Broncos and the Chiefs, right? I mean, those 4 games are just going to be absolutely must-watch. I think that it'll be a really fun game, I think, at obviously at the Colts. I think it will be a really interesting game, especially with, Matt Ryan and kind of a Matt Ryan, Justin Herbert duel. I think it'll be a lot of fun. Obviously, the battle for LA is going to have this place buzzing and exploding in a way that I think we've never seen before, truth be told, because I think the dynamic, a Rams-Chargers dynamic is going to feel so fresh compared to what a Rams-Raiders dynamic was before. The Raiders always felt, even when they were in LA for those 13 years, still always felt like the Oakland Raiders. And then, obviously not having football for 24 years. So I'm so excited about that game because it's going to be so fresh. I think hosting the Titans, I think, is going to be another compelling game as well. But overall, I think that, it's a very manageable schedule, truth be told. I think the other interesting game potentially is at the Browns, and what really happens there in terms of, who's going to be quarterbacking the Browns? Is it going to be Deshaun? Is it going to be Baker? I was having a conversation with a friend earlier where he said that, look, if Deshaun gets suspended, and, the smartest thing for Baker to do would be to hold out, frankly, if you really wanted to drive up his value. So, are they going to play Deshaun? Are they going to play Baker? Are they going to play some guy off the street? So I think there's some really kind of compelling games and storylines. But overall, I think it's a manageable schedule outside of the division. And I expect the Chargers to be right there at kind of the 10 win, 10-11 win mark potentially based on the schedule that I've seen.
Yeah, I agree. And we'll, like I said, at a later show, we'll kind of go game by game and give some predictions here. But starting with that Rams game, let's just start with that because we'll talk about that on the Rams end too. But that game, I love that part of me wanted it to be the opener. I know it was impossible because the Rams are going to have a home game as an opener, and this is technically a Chargers home game, so it was never going to happen. I realized that before anyone starts freaking out because the Rams are going to be raising their banner. But I thought the dynamic would have been fun as the openers to kick the season off with, full LA tilt. But I love that instead of having it early, they made it week 17, the second to last week, the last non-division game, because it will have huge playoff implications because these are both playoff teams. I think we all can agree with that, or at least have playoff and Super Bowl aspirations. But B, being it the last non-division game, because every team ends with a division game in week 18, Chargers in with the Broncos. It just adds to that level of, it's not a division game, but it's an inner city game in the same city, in the same stadium. And we can start hopefully truly building a fun rivalry like we have with some of the other LA teams. That I think this one can be the best of them all, though, because how do I say it? Like the Lakers and Clippers rivalry has never really matriculated, if you will, because Lakers have 17 championships, Clippers have none. I mean, there's just so much big brother, little brother. Yes, the Rams are definitely the big brother to the Chargers, but it's since being in LA, it's 1-0. It's not 17-0. It's not 5-0. It's 1-0. And it just happened last year. So it's a lot closer, at least in terms of winning and sustainability. And so I think we can truly see that rivalry really have fun and play. And I hope fans embrace it and don't just have it. I hope it's like a heated, fun rivalry and not like a disrespectful, blah, 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 which it probably will be. But I love that game. It's going to be a blast. But let me ask you this, Jamal, the home opener, the season opener, hosting the Raiders. I'll give you my opinion, but what's your thoughts on that?
I think it's compelling. I think it's I think it's going to be a lot of fun, especially with the moves that the Raiders have made with Devonta, and obviously with kind of the way things ended last season, right? In terms of kind of Chargers, Raiders, and how what really transpired at the end last season, and who ultimately got into the playoffs, and obviously all the controversy involved there. So to just sort of dive right back into that. I think the NFL hit a home run on that. I mean, when you think about who would have been the most compelling opener for the Chargers, in terms of storyline, I don't think you could have necessarily beaten opening with the Raiders, truth be told. In terms of just, we're talking about kind of the history that we hope we see with the Rams and the Chargers. Chargers Raiders already have history. It's already very real history of this era. It's Justin Herbert, Carr history, and it's played out on the field. So I absolutely love it. I think the NFL hit a grand slam with that.
Yeah, I obviously there's some recency bias there, but to my memory, that was the best regular season game last season. I know it was the last regular season game, so obviously that's what we remember most. But that game and how Justin Herbert willed that team down 15 with 4 minutes left with the 6 fourth down conversions or 5 or whatever it was. And then the drama and overtime, which, we're not going to discuss that again because it's been overplayed and overkilled, but it was just such a good game. And now to just take that and just start it off right away. The only thing I'm a little surprised is it's not a primetime game. You have the Rams playing Thursday night to kick off the season. So they could have easily had this as the Sunday night or Monday night game. And I know they did Monday night with Russ returning to Seattle, which I think is a home run also. But they could have had this as a Sunday night game. I think the Sunday night game is Bucks Cowboys, I think. If I'm not mistaken, I think it's the Bucks. I think it's Bucks Cowboys, which is a good game, but Chargers Raiders for sure is better. And so my only reservation on it, Jamal, and I'm curious your thoughts, and I hate even bringing this up because I've always been a defender of this Chargers fan base because I think they're just an underrated, great fan base. But it's just factual. We know there's going to be a ton of Raider fans at the game. So I hate that out the gates, the narrative already is going to be, oh, look at the fan takeover for the home opener. That's the only thing I hate because it's going to happen. And that's nothing against Charger fans. You just know there's still a lot of Raider fans here in LA. It's just a fact. We live here. We know how it is. Chargers are growing. The fan base is great. They're supportive. They're passionate. It's growing in numbers, but there's still a 30-year, building of Raider fan base here in the Los Angeles area. So that's the only thing I'm a little bummed out. You start the season off with having those fun, annoying narratives, but hopefully Chargers fans just show out and don't sell any tickets.
Absolutely. Hopefully Chargers fans bolt up. And I think it's one of the reasons that if we, and we'll get to the Rams obviously, but I think it's one of the reasons why the NFL didn't want Niners Rams as the opener,
same exact thing.
Right. It's the exact same thing. And it's only magnified when it's defending champions, it's banner night, it's ring night and so forth. And if you have a potential, not even a stadium takeover, but if you have more road fans than normal, you don't want to take away from any of that. And so I think that for the Charger fans, it's challenge accepted. Look, we have one of the 6 or 7 best quarterbacks in football. We basically won the NFL offseason. We're littered with superstars. This is our year. It's the first time we're going all in, which is a very different model than the Chargers of the years past. It's a different vibe. It's a different energy. It's a different philosophy. So it should be different fan behavior. So I think challenge accepted. And I'm excited to see all the Charger fans out there and having, it's going to be a great atmosphere. And then when you sort of talk about the history of the AFC West with Chargers and Raiders across multiple cities, Oakland, LA, San Diego, LA, it's just such a rich game. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would argue that they're probably I love the AFC West because every team is equally, like the rivalry is equal, but I think the Chargers Raiders is probably a little bit higher than Broncos or Chiefs, I would say, just because it was always California, right? Battle of SoCal versus NorCal for so many years. And even when the Raiders were in LA, then the Chargers were in San Diego, an hour and a half away. So I think there's just a little bit more, which just makes it that much more fun. And, we talked, and I had one more question about the Chargers schedule, we'll go to the Rams, but we talked when we were on Radio Row about the faces of LA football on these teams. And it was at the time, obviously the Rams were in the Super Bowl. And at the time it was pretty heavily Rams over. I think we had like 2 USC Trojans. I don't even know if we had any Bruins, and then we had like 2 Chargers, and then like 6 or 7 Rams.
Yes.
And I think now you can argue it's fairly equal with the addition of Khalil Mack, with JC Jackson coming to town. I mean, there's a lot of not just superstar football players, but star power, Hollywood star power on this Chargers team now, which I think makes their story so exciting, and which makes this LA football so exciting when now you can pit the Chargers versus the Rams in terms of not just quality on the football field. The coaches are stars in Sean McVay and Brandon Staley. They're both just like star figures. And then the quarterbacks are stars, and you have pass rushing stars. You have linebacker. I mean, it's so much fun for both these teams where they're at. Last thing, Jamal, before we move to the Rams, you mentioned some of the away games or some of the out of division games, the Colts, the Browns. If which we are planning as the LA Football Network, to go to one away game every year for each team is the hope. We're going to do an away tailgate where, a lot of the LA football fam just comes out. We meet people that are away fans that live out there and do a tailgate. So of these away games, the Cleveland, you could say interdivision, Kansas City, Denver, which one entices you most to travel to?
Oh, I would say I got 2. I mean, and it'd be tied for 2. I think going to Kansas City would be a ton of fun in terms of the rivalry and just who they are as sort of where they've been the last 4 years and just them as a football town. And I got to be honest with you, I think just for the history, going to the Dog Pound would be amazing, and going to Cleveland, to be honest with you. Those would be the 2 those would be my votes. Obviously, I think Denver, I think the world of Denver as a place. Me and my wife love Boulder so much. And, so if it was for a vacation, I would say Denver hands down. But I think if we're going for a tailgate, I would vote for Kansas City or Cleveland.
Yep. Those are actually my 2. Hit the nail on the head. Cleveland, the history, the Hall of Fame being down the road. I mean, people forget last year that game was like a 42-38 thriller. I mean, it was just a great football game too. So yeah, absolutely. I think those would be my 2. All right, let's shift to the Rams now. Hardest schedule in football the Rams got, which rightfully so. They won the Super Bowl, right? I mean, and that's sometimes it's some bad luck, but I think it should be the hardest schedule. I remember the Buccaneers won the Super Bowl 2 years ago, and they ended up getting like the 17th hardest schedule just by, obviously it was luck, but it's like, come on, are you serious? Rams get the hardest schedule. Before we just kind of go through it, let's just start at the top. Buffalo Bills right out the gate, raising the banners. You get the AFC favorite. This is a potential Super Bowl preview. I was mixed on it before because I was like, you know what? I kind of want them. You don't want to say you don't want the challenge, right? Like I'm not trying to say I'm shying away from that, but part of me was like, I'd rather kind of have a game where we can come out and kind of dominate and just, there's no raising our banner and then defeat afterwards. And I'm not saying I don't think they can beat the Bills. I absolutely do, but there's obviously a much bigger risk of losing that game. Whereas if they played a game like against Miami or Arizona, there would be a better, consistency of winning and just keeping that and then play the Bills later on. Once, it's the first game of the season too. You're still working out kinks, you're getting stuff like that. But since they've announced it, I'm so excited. It's going to be such a great game. What's your thoughts on opener versus the Bills?
Oh, yeah. I mean, this was – and Ryan, ironically enough, I think it was the game – like we predicted, you and I, that it probably would be the Bills at home as the opener, kind of by process elimination and this notion of prime time for sure. I think if you look at it on paper, Vegas odds, all of the pundits, if you will, you're talking about the preseason NFC favorite versus the preseason AFC favorite, and going in, those are the 2 favorites in each of the conferences. And so you're basically, odds on Super Bowl preview, obviously way too early, way premature, but this is going to be must-see TV. And how the Bills, it really feels like the Bills' year to break through in the AFC and get to the Super Bowl after a couple of years of heartbreak. What is their disposition going to be like from day 1, minute 1, game 1 with Allen, now getting a few more weapons in the running game with everything else that they have going. And then obviously the Rams reloading. Oh man, this is just going to be absolutely phenomenal. You got Allen and Stafford. I mean, get your popcorn ready right out of the gate. This is one of the 5 or 6 best games in football week 1. And it's really incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, you get Von Miller, with the Rams returning back to LA after signing with the Bills. That'll be interesting to see how he's received.
I think it's going to be
Yeah,
nothing but praise and standing O's and just so
as it
much
should be.
appreciation for Vaughn.
Yeah, as it should be. Yeah, right now BetOnline has the Rams as a 1-point favorite, so very close in that. We'll see if that line shifts. But man, it seems like this is the year Buffalo makes it. Like every year they're one of the top favorites, and they just can't seem to get past Kansas City. And it seems like this is their year to put it all together with adding Von Miller. They had a really good draft. We've talked about on our stream how James Cook, we think, went to a great spot there, running back for the Bills. Added some other firepower, like you mentioned. So this is a tough get out the gate for the Rams. And not to mention, you have the great coaching battle of Sean McVay and Sean McDermott, who's, they was the same coaching cycle. They were hired the same year. It was kind of they were headlined. It was McVay, Shanahan, and McDermott were kind of the headlining three coaches of that cycle. And McDermott obviously went through the first 2 years of rebuilding and grooming Josh Allen. And now they've reached that pinnacle where they're kind of one of the favorites in the AFC, but haven't been able to get over the hump and reach an AFC title game. And this seems like the year, but we'll see if the Rams can raise the banner and fly off that momentum and get Allen Robinson going in a Rams uni and have Bobby Wagner running around. And it's gonna be a lot of fun. It's gonna be a lot of fun in the game. Who just off the top do you like that? Again, we're not doing predictions, but hey, we can do one.
No, I think that, home opener, ring night, you're oozing confidence, really hard. Even when it's sort of a marquee game, it's hard for a champion to lose opening night at home. I think the Rams will certainly do it. I think it's going to be a battle though. But I also think what's interesting is that the Bills will most undoubtedly have this game, circled on their calendar immediately off the bat. And so I think that their preparation is going to be very strong, because if you look at the AFC East and you look at sort of the Bills schedule, it's not exactly murderer's row. And so it's much easier to sort of highlight the big games and really sort of hone in. And when you look at the Rams schedule, it's the 1927 Yankees, lineup basically in terms of their schedule, with one of many big games. But obviously, given that it's opening night, I think it'll be the Rams in a nail biter, maybe a little bit lower scoring than people, may anticipate or expect, because I think it is week one, and I think there is a lack of rhythm there. So I would probably take the under on the total points, but I think the Rams will probably pull it out.
There you go. Over under right now is set at 52. So that gives you like a 26-25 score-ish to stay under that. Of course, Jamal, we're already running out of time, so we'll do this kind of quickly here. But we talked pre-air, really the only quote-unquote easy games, which there are no easy games in the NFL. You play every Sunday. Any given Sunday, any team can win. But the really only somewhat easy would be at home against the Falcons in week 2 and at home against the Panthers in week 6. Outside of that, which again, those teams can beat anyone. We talked about Drake London going to Atlanta. He's going to be coming home to LA for the first time in week 2. Expect a big game from him. But outside of that, every game is murderer's row. And I want to highlight this to end the show today, Jamal. After Thanksgiving, you get at Kansas City, you get home against Seattle, then you get the Raiders at Green Bay, home against Denver, at LA Chargers, which, is home, whatever you want to call it. That is a brutal way to end the schedule when you have, cream of the crop in the AFC with the Chiefs, a newly rebuilt Raiders team. You still got a division game against the Seahawks, and then obviously Aaron Rodgers and the Packers and Russell Wilson and the Broncos, and then Herbert and the Chargers. What's your thoughts on that murderer's row for the champs to end the season? Quickly here.
Well, Ryan, honestly, it's the hardest schedule preseason that I've ever seen an NFL team have. And, given that you're a defending champion, I think the emphasis is going to have to be, you got to go 6-0 in the division. And I think that's got to be sort of the mindset, because I think the non-conference, the out of division, I should say, is brutal. And I think especially as you're sort of you want to find your stride at the right time as a defending champion. So you want to sort of have enough margin for error there to have, obviously we're hoping for the top seed, but certainly a top 2 or 3 seed going into the playoffs. But it just makes having to win those division games, it's got to be paramount. They got to go 6-0 clean sheet in the division to really set themselves up for success. Because at Packers, at Chiefs, holy cow, Bucks. You're talking about every other top contender in the NFC and every other top contender in the AFC they're playing. It's insane.
And on the road.
They have 7 championship games in the regular season. It's unreal.
Yeah, exactly. So it's going to be wild. We'll be talking about it all offseason, doing some predictions, some analysis, and stuff like that. That's all the time we got, though. Super pumped. Jamal Madni, my new full-time co-host, will be back again next week with plenty of stuff for. We didn't even get to talk about Addison. We ran out of time, of course. Well, so we'll talk about that next week if he's not a Trojan by then already, former Blitnikoff winner. But Jamal, as always, thanks for joining me. Stoked to be having you here on the regular. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ryan.
So thank you all for listening. This is the LA Football Show. I'm Ryan Dyrud. That's Jamal, the Madman, Madni. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you guys all next week.